those are the people I truly serve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of a man.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is year 0. Today, I have Typo on the show from Biting the Bullet. I met Typo at Childeberg, and we had discussed having him on the podcast, and I decided now was the right time. We discussed the military mindset, breaking out of the military mindset back into society, and narrative around libertarianism and what veterans have to offer libertarianism. So I think this will be a good show. I think y'all will really enjoy this. I had a really good time chatting with Typo. I really like the guy and hope to hang out with him again next Childeberg. But first, RyanBunting.com. For all of your graphic design needs, go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a great libertarian and great anarcho-capitalist. He's also a great graphic designer. So go to RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs. He designed my podcast logo and Pete Quinones' podcast logo for Free Man Beyond the Wall. So RyanBunting.com for all of your podcast graphic design needs, and check out his book, Project Manicore. But he doesn't have a podcast. Sorry, I stumbled there. Whatever. Thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. Enjoy the show. Okay, I am here with Typo from Biting the Bullet. And we met at Childeberg, man. And I had a really good time meeting you, Spirit of Resistance, and BR. And BR is a trip for sure. I think Spirit of Resistance spent more time chilling at our camp, talking with my wife and playing with the dogs than he did anything else.
Yeah, they were. I mean, both of them were there for a while. But anytime I was looking for like SOR, I just knew he's probably over there with Tommy and Scott hanging out with the dogs. And it's probably the dogs is what kept him there, honestly. I don't even know if he was that into Tom or Scott.
I don't know if it were the dogs or my wife's food, because she just kept feeding him.
Oh, yeah. You guys had the best food. Every time there was something new, I would always sneak over there for a little sample, too, because I knew it was gonna be something good.
Yeah. But, so for those that don't know who you are and have never heard of your podcast, break it down a little bit for us. Tell us who you are, like a little bit about your background and then what your podcast is.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So my name's Typo. It's kind of a nickname that I got from the Marine Corps, but I joined the Marine Corps in 2012 as an intel analyst. I think around there is toward the end of my career in the Marine Corps. Well, I met Luke at the beginning, and I knew Luke the whole time through. And Jared, I met at the end of my time. And we all got out. Those are my co-hosts, by the way. I probably should mention that. Or they were my co-hosts. Jared's kind of coming back and forth, but it's mainly me and Luke. But you'll see Jared a lot more lately. But we all got out with a massive disdain for the military. We knew something. It wasn't what was sold to us. And we recognized a lot of issues and problems with inside the Marine Corps. And when we got out, we decided that, hey, maybe we're not the only vets out there that feel this way. So we started talking and just made a podcast, and definitely grown. But we're at over 100 episodes now. It's been going for over 2 years, which is a lot longer and a lot more episodes than I ever thought we'd achieve. But our biggest thing is kind of like we're definitely anti-state, anti-government. But our biggest thing that brought us together and on the podcast is our anti-war stance. And that's kind of what brought us all into libertarianism, was just being anti-war, and libertarians to me are the best ones against the war state. And but yeah, so our podcast is more comedy. I mean, we get serious as well, but it's more just if for any veterans out there, it's kind of like a back in the smoke pit where you can hang out, shoot the shit. We drink and tell military stories, and just it's a place to just listen to us shoot the shit and yell against the war.
It reminds me of the barracks. That's what it reminds me of.
We hear that a lot.
It's just it's like walking through the barracks, listening to different conversations all over the place, you know? And yeah, no, I listen to y'all every once in a while. I'm horrible about being like super attentive to any one particular podcast. I go through phases. I'm like, oh, I'll listen to this for like the next month, and I won't listen to anything else. That's all I'm listening to. So I'm just like binging, you know. It's like watching that damn show that I liked so much, whatever it was called, True Detective, the first season. Like, I sat down with that. I sat down with that, and I just binged and binged and binged. You know, I watched it like every other month for like a year or some shit like that.
Yeah, man.
But but I do like y'all's show, and I like the way y'all set it up, and it's funny. Y'all aren't. And you kind of, and it's very attractive to people like me because you have the dark humor. You know,
that's kind of our whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I think I didn't go into combat, but I was in the military, you know, but I've worked, oil field jobs. I've only been a trucker or in the oil field or in the military. Like, that's all I've ever been. So it's always that dark, sick, you know, kind of twisted sense of humor. And so that's really attractive about y'all's podcast, and it's really a good podcast. So y'all have talked a lot about kind of when you came across like kind of your dismay with the military, and it seems to me like all three of you kind of realized while you were in the military, like, this is a bunch of bullshit. Like, the whole thing is a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, and honestly, I think a lot of people that go to the military understand that. They or at least they have a feeling that this is bullshit, like something's wrong, but they don't really know how to articulate it very well. And if you never really understand what's happening, and like, you know, most people I talk to, you know, they got out for a reason, and that's what most people do, is they do their time and they get out. And don't get me wrong, there's some great memories I have along the way with, you know, friends, and there's some people that I'll know probably for the rest of my life that I'll consider my brother. But I think a lot of people that going through the military is they realize something's wrong, and they realize something's bullshit. And a lot of times it's the command that they're in charge of, and a lot of people will assume that maybe it's just my command that I'm in charge of, and maybe another command would be better. But most people get out and don't give any other command a try. And I've been in 2 different commands, and from talking to multiple different vets, it's not just the commands, it's all over the military. That's the problem. And I think, you know, just the different experiences we've all had. It's weird because I always describe the military as probably like the best time of my life, but also the worst time of my life. Yeah. Where, like, I was young, I didn't have any responsibilities, because when you're in the Marine Corps, you give them all up. You give everything up. They'll do all your responsibilities for you. All you got to do is take orders and then enjoy your time off. And that without having that responsibility, that, like, you don't have to worry about anything, so you can kind of be more carefree. But at the same time, you don't have your liberty. You don't have the liberty to do what you want, say what you want, you know, even post on Facebook what you want. And I just think that's not your liberties is what makes losing your liberties is what makes the military like the worst thing ever.
Well, I mean, there would be some people that would argue, and these arguments have been going on for decades, and I don't think we have to break them down like extensively here, but it's worth thinking about that the act of giving up responsibility is freedom within itself. And so by giving up responsibility, you're giving up a certain amount of your free will in order to appreciate the lack of responsibility. So like you don't have to answer for anything anymore. So you kind of give up that free will, and when you're trying to, but what they fail to see is that in the military, if you try to taste or experience any of that free will, any of your own personal like autonomy, like that's how you get in trouble. That's how you get in real shit, and I found that out real fast. And that's why I never went to combat, because when my unit was being sent to combat, I was being discharged because they were like, all right, this dude's a fucking maniac. He's not going to make it. Like, he's just not going to make it. Like, because I'm like you, some of the best people I ever met were in the military. And maybe because I don't have any combat experience, maybe it's the same for combat experience. I guess it could be, but my favorite parts of the military was the camaraderie, that brotherhood that you experienced, and those friendships that you look back at and you're like, God, man, we were fucking stupid. like we were dumb.
Yeah. And I feel like there's that feeling of like, I don't know, you were in the military, so you probably saw like the weirdest and wildest things would just happen sometimes. And I don't know what it is, if it's like people are just so bored and like, I don't know, they want to not conform somehow, so they just do like the weirdest things. Like I don't know, but like there'd just be always something weird and crazy that'd be happening. And I think it's like when everyone's like miserable in a way, like you don't want to be there, or like you want to be doing something else, but you sign that contract, so you have to be there. It's like misery loves company. And that's why, like, you kind of have to make friends and go out and hang out with people, because if you don't, like, you could probably be really depressed if you're thinking about, wow, that sucks in the military. Like, you just want to do everything you can to get your mind off it. And a lot of times you're just sitting around bored because you're in the middle of training, waiting to do the next thing. So you just end up talking and joking and, I don't know, saying the weirdest and wildest things.
Right. Well, and it's no shock, I'm sure, to you either, that it was World War II veterans and military veterans that started motorcycle clubs. Like these wild guys that want to get out there and ride on two wheels at 120 miles an hour were, ex-fighter pilots. No, you don't say.
Wow, I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah. The history of motorcycle clubs, especially like the Hells Angels and the Booze Fighters, it's all started with World War II veterans. After they got out of the military, they were looking for that brotherhood, and that was something that I struggled with when I got out of the military, was not having that camaraderie. I was happy to be out of rank and, like not have the commander above me, but I was not happy to be set back off into civilization, where I had to learn how to interact with civilians again. Like that, like the mindset is completely different.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think doing that alone has to be really hard. Because you go from, it's like almost entering the Twilight Zone when you join the military. Like, it's not how the regular civilian world operate at all. And it's just, I don't know, everyone looks the same because you're all wearing the same shit. Everyone kind of talks different. It's a different language. There's a different set of common courtesies. So like, it's just how you interact with people on a military base when you're in the military is a lot different than how you'd act like in a Walmart. And when you just take yourself out of it, and I read this before, but prisoners have kind of the same issue as like when they go back into society.
They call it being institutionalized when you're coming out of prison, right?
Yeah, they call it institutionalized. But I've always heard this about my friends and stuff, because a lot of them, they got out of the military and they just went back home, and they didn't have like veteran friends or anything there. Maybe they had a family member that understood, but they didn't have anyone really that was their peer group that they could hang out with and talk to, and that would really understand. When I got out, I moved in with my two best friends from the Marine Corps. So as weird as like getting out still was, it was really helpful to go home and then like complain to both my roommates about what some stupid college kid said at class today about something that makes no sense or whatever. Like it just made it so much better to have them around, because I could just say something or talk to them and they are going through the same thing, so they could be like, yeah, I totally get it. And me and Luke always advise people, like, if you're going to get out, man, and you're getting around the same time as your buddy, it might not be a bad idea just to move in with them and, go through this kind of transition together. And I'm not saying it's like the worst thing in the world, but it'll make it a lot easier, I think.
Yeah, it took, I want to say it, and maybe I'm just a slow learner, but it took me 10 years to really acclimate and get back into the groove.
There's definitely people that never do.
Yeah, no, obviously. But it was hard. And so this is like something that I like to talk to Matthew Ho about, because I never even experienced combat, but I don't even know if you would call it PTSD. I don't think that's necessarily the right term for it. I think institutionalization is a better term for it. But there's this mindset. You're put in this mindset, and you're framed in this mindset, and that's how you live your life. And then when you leave that life and you re-enter civilian life, it's completely different, and your mindset is so altered, and you're trying to figure out how does it's this like conundrum. It's like, how does somebody who's been told for the last like 2 years of their life, or the last 8 months of their life, or the last 8 years of their life, that they're the baddest motherfucker alive, walk into a bar and let somebody mean mug them for a second? Like, that just like, it doesn't register the same way with you, And if so, it takes a lot of discipline, and you're trying to figure out, like, maybe this dude's just having a bad day. He's not even looking at me. He's looking past me. Like, that didn't even register because your eyes are in my direction. Like, all right, do we have a problem now? And so it was that type of stuff that I had a real issue with, because it was like, you're being told, I was at the 82nd, which is Fort Bragg. So I was airborne infantry. And so we're being told constantly that you are the baddest motherfuckers on the planet. You're the baddest. And then, like, would the baddest motherfucker on the planet let some dude look at him cross? Is that how the baddest motherfucker on the planet acts? Yeah.
I totally understand that. Yeah.
So you gotta relearn how to civilize yourself, because they basically take somebody who was an animal that had been civilized, recreate an animal out of you, and then when you get out, it's up to you to re-civilize. You're supposed to just know how to do this, and it's so unnatural.
Yeah, and like, plus the type of people that join the military, I would just say probably tend to be much more aggressive. So when you're in the military, you're surrounded by kind of aggressive people all the time, and and like, when I was in, like, competition was a big deal. Like, you gotta be the best, and usually that meant like physical activity, whether it be like running or pull-ups or
jiu-jitsu.
Even wrestling, jiu-jitsu, anything, any sort of competition. And there's, we would always do some sort of combat sport, and so like, that was kind of the mentality you're in the whole time. And then all of a sudden, you get out, you can't just like get mad at your coworker and be like, let's go settle this on the mat. Let's go right now. And you can't do stuff like that.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Karen in HR. So
that bitch in HR. Yeah, exactly. I'd choke her ass out in a heartbeat.
Yeah. And you can't, yeah, that's it. Like in the language, man. I mean, like I on our podcast and around when I'm talking with like people in the military, I tend to like cuss a lot more. I don't know if it's my comfortability or if it's like just the language that falls into happen. But when I first got out, I just had no filter. I was saying whatever I wanted. And then I went to college.
I didn't outgrow that.
Yeah.
I didn't go into college, though. I went into truck driving, so it was like, whatever. I say cunt as much as possible. Plus, I married a foreigner. The cunt is just like bitch to them, so I was like, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess, I mean, I kind of did the typical vet route, which is like get out of the military and go to college. And I gave that a try for a couple of years. And that is just not college is probably the worst place a veteran could go, in my opinion, right after the military, is because like that environment is like, it's like kind of in like the exact opposite institutions. Like you have the military where they want you to be aggressive and almost like disgusting and just savage, but orderly. And then like college is like, there's no real order and everyone's like, trying to coddle you. And I don't know. It's just
one of the questions that I would have for you, because like I said, I never went to college, so I don't know anything about that experience, but going from the military to college, did you try to join a fraternity to see if you could replace that kind of camaraderie? And was there a similar kind of like vibe to it, or?
So I actually never, I don't know why, but in the military, there's like very, like the Marine Corps, at least the people I was around, had very like hatred for fraternities, because every time Marines would party around college kids, like sometimes fraternity guys would try to tell us like, oh, I know what it's like I understand that brotherhood, and where they're like, just shut up, dude, you have no idea what it's like. It's not even that we're brothers because we pledged together, we're brothers because we're fucking miserable together. Like, fuck you, man, you don't know what it's like. And so I was never interested in joining a fraternity, so I never went anywhere near them.
Well, fraternity doesn't have that intensity that the military has, where the guy on your right and on your left are there to keep you alive. Right. So like that's a different type of intensity. That's a different mindset and a different type of brotherhood. I just didn't know if it was a replacement, because I've often like kind of like tried to explain to people what the military mindset is and why there's like this brotherhood. And I've done this in a way to try to expropriate like what it is that police feel, right? And so I've often like described it as a fraternal order of sorts, but I don't know if that I've never like explored it enough to figure out if that's correct.
Yeah, I actually have some like cops in my family, so I kind of understand how they think a little bit, but I think like what it is like it kind of like in the military, you get put into a situation and I mean, this one, maybe the only difference I would say is like cops have it's a lot easier for them to walk away than it is for someone in the military. But, people that join the military, like I think a lot of people join for their own benefit, some sort of college or whatever that is. But I think a lot of people really do believe that they're joining the military to possibly fight off any enemies and protect freedom here and protect our country. And I honestly do believe that. And I think a lot of cops, even though, I think they're kind of duped in a way where they're like, you're stopping crime and criminals. And then like, that's what's sold to them is like, you're the protector, but then they get there and it's a lot different. But I think that, and then, they all go through this like training together or whatever, and they're all constantly hated. I mean, you could say rightly or wrongly, but the reality is they're constantly hated. And I think when you have a lot of sort of animosity toward a group, it makes that group a lot stronger. And when, they're constantly being destroyed for everything they do, it makes these people in the police force get bonded together. And that's why you see them like go out on the limb to protect each other and stuff. Because honestly, that's what almost any sort of group that's working together would do, is they'll do everything they can to protect each other. And I think that's the bond that kind of brings everyone together.
Yeah. So when you were in, were you deployed?
No, I was I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan for 2 years. I jumped over to Korea and did some training, and then I went to California. But no, I never deployed into the Middle East or anything.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, what did you make of the news on Afghanistan last week?
Honestly, I was really shocked with how quickly everything kind of collapsed. I really thought that the government or the Afghan army would have at least fought off the Taliban a little bit, but it seemed like they completely rolled over, and that was the biggest shock to me. But with the Taliban taking over and the whole thing collapsing, like honestly, it was pretty predictable. And I mean, I listen to Scott Horton a lot. He's probably one of my favorite podcasts. So, I've read both of his books. So like and he convinced me. So like anything that kind of happened and was going on there, I kind of felt that and I mean, I was in the military too. And I knew a lot of guys that did deploy over there, and every single one of them had not a damn good thing to say about the Afghan army. I mean, They hated them. So like, it probably shouldn't have shocked me that much that it collapsed that fast. But I mean, that was amazing. And honestly, after all that happened, though, I was just so happy to hear like what Biden said when he got on there and basically announced that he's ending the Afghan war. And I mean, I hope that's true. I hope we don't ever go back. But I think overall, I'm happy. I'm glad we don't have to send anyone there anymore, and hopefully we can end other ones.
Yeah, I had Kyle Anzalone on right after the announcement, and the one thing I kept coming back to, I was like, I'm so fucking cynical about this shit, dude. I just don't even believe that they're like really like going to withdraw everybody. It feels like they're trying to find a way. And again, I'm cynical, so could just be my own cynicism. But I'm so concerned that they're going to try to find a way to create a permanent like military base like they did in Japan or Germany in Afghanistan. That I just kind of look at it and I'm like, I mean, how many trillions of dollars went into Bagram and the Taliban took it back in like a day? And so I'm like, well, maybe not, like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just too old and cynical and just like these fucking assholes can never be trusted to do anything good. Like that's kind of the way I look at it. So I do have to question my own like ideas and thoughts on the subject. I haven't been paying near as much attention as I should, but that's interesting that you brought up Scott Horton, because I did want to ask you, like, coming out of the military, how long were you in?
5 years.
You were in 5 years? So after 5 years, like, discovering Scott Horton, what did that feel like?
So I found him through Pete's podcast, because I listen to Pete's podcast a lot. So I would probably say that after I got out of the Marine Corps, I didn't really listen to podcasts or anything until I started working at a construction job. And one of my buddies, actually Jared, who's on the show, who's part of the show, he showed me like he told me Tom Woods' podcast, and that's where it started. and then I got to Scott Horton, like some tree connection. I ended up listening to Scott Horton, and the first time I listened to Scott Horton he was like guest on like maybe Pete's show or Dave Smith's show or Scott or Tom Woods' show. And a lot of the things the guy was saying, I disagreed with, even though I didn't really know the opposite side and like what the actual argument would be like against him. But I was like, then like I just couldn't, there's no way I could believe him, because I was like, no, that's not true. Like we wouldn't be doing that. Like we're not like, I know the Marine Corps is bad, but like, Marine Corps is not that bad, really. And for a while, I kind of just gaffed him off a little bit. But then I don't know I forgot exactly what it was. I don't know. I couldn't remember. But then I don't know, something clicked. And when he said that, and after that, I almost like I became obsessed with him, because he was like probably the first person in my life that ever actually explained to me like what these wars mean and what's going on with actual detail. And and he has the receipts. Yeah. So like, when I was in, it was always like, oh, they're bad because they're bad, and you got to kill the enemy because they're the enemy. And it's like they were just very bland and broad about why we were fighting these guys, or like why my friends have to go fight them
because Haji wants to rape your mother.
Yeah, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, stuff like that would happen all the time. And so when actually someone that was kind of explaining things way more in detail, and and plus it was like he would say something, and then I would be like think back to like me in the Marine Corps, and I'd be like, oh my God, I know exactly what he's talking about. And ever since that, like I think Scott's like he's woken me up the most, and he's one of my favorite people to listen to. And I think a lot of veterans love Scott Horton because it's someone that's actually telling them the truth.
Yeah. Well, that's a transformation story too. Like if you really think about it, like you dedicated 5 years of your life to a specific job, to acting in a specific way, doing a specific thing. And this man comes into your purview that you'd never heard of before, that has no military credentials whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And he tells you that everything that you just spent the last 5 years doing was evil. And so I sympathize a lot with those with cognitive dissonance, because how hard is it to not only have you dedicated 5 years of your life, but you've been educated for 15,000 hours, right? By these people. And then you have people like you or I coming out and saying, no, these people are lying to you. And they're lying to you intentionally to get your support so that they can do evil things across the world. And so it's like cognitive dissonance actually makes sense. Like when you really think about it. Yeah, like on a psychological level, on an emotional level, because like what could that do to a person to find out that you have been on the side of evil for 5 years while you thought you were doing good? And that can do like a lot of damage to a person's psyche. And so it says a lot about your ability to confront your own psyche and to face facts and come to the conclusions that you've come to, and respect Scott for what he does, as opposed to just being completely his dire enemy for his entire life. And I think libertarians in general, and when I say libertarians, I mean something other than what most people on Twitter mean. But I think libertarians in general have discovered that entering that dark realm where you discover things about yourself and your own psyche isn't as scary or as intimidating as you once thought it was. And so they expect everybody, they hold everybody to that same standard. And I think that's a false standard to hold people to.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I think a lot of people, like, I mean, honestly, this happened to us. I mean, when we were like kind of like getting into liberty, and we're like, honestly, it started like, we were like, you know what, we're against the wars, and I guess that means we have to vote for Gary Johnson. So we were all like, fuck it, we're gonna vote for Gary Johnson. And then he's the guy that kind of got us into libertarianism, honestly, and that just led us down the rabbit holes that we went down. But when we were like first kind of like getting on Twitter, because I never really used Twitter before. I made one in high school, but I tweeted some dumb things when I was 16. I think I just got it because I knew girls were on there, and so I was like, I don't really use it. But then we started using Twitter to like talk to like the Timeline Earth guys, and we were like Beltwave upset veteran libertarians. Like, we were just like
Reason and Cato.
Like, we know something's wrong, and you guys are at least somewhat like, and like most people, even Cato and Reason, like they're pretty anti-war. So like that's what brought us in. Like,
Cato has one of the greatest anti-war think tanks is Cato. Is part of Cato.
That's awesome.
Like I have no dispute with their stance on war.
Yeah, they're just the beltwave types, and like honestly, I mean, it works for me, so I don't really diss on them for that. Yeah. So, but what was like? Oh, so when I was on Twitter. No, I remembered now. I do it all the time. But when we were first getting on Twitter, and we were like, yeah, we're Marine Corps veterans, like, just kind of like putting it out there. And then like the first thing a lot of like, I would say more ANCAPs would say is like, they were like baby killers, like just straight up, like, they're like, oh, you don't like us. And like we would get it. I mean, it didn't happen too often to scare us away or anything, but we would get attacked sometimes by people that would just straight up say like, you're just a pawn of the state. And I'm like, well, I'm trying not to be, guys, but thanks. And they would insult us and stuff. And honestly, like, I think a lot of people this is probably a big problem in libertarians, where they're like, they think every single person that even was an agent of the state in some way is somehow going to be your enemy. And I think a lot of times, just from my experiences, like the people that were, in federal workers or in the military or whatever, it tends to be the biggest voices against the whole apparatus itself, because they just know how the insides and outs. And so I think, when a lot of people do put like their, false ideas on people, and it's not a good way to do it. And that's kind of why we made our podcast, is we want to reach those veterans that, see something wrong and understand that something wrong, and tell them that it's okay to think like that, and we'll take you in. We won't tell you you're a baby killer. Right.
Well, I mean, that's a type of cognitive dissonance for libertarians, because these people like worship Edward Snowden. Well, who did Edward Snowden work for before you worshipped him? Exactly. He worked for the state, right? Like, so you're just another, like, I'm a lower level whistleblower, so I'm not near as effective on the grand scale, but I don't mean as much because, like, I don't reach your heights. The biggest problem that all libertarians have, and all anarchists and ANCAPs have, is they expect the newbies, the newly transitioned to have read everything they've already read. It's like, no, dude, you had to read all that shit too. Give the guys some fucking time. It took you 4 fucking years to read, Man, Economy, and State. So fucking give the dude 4 years, like, what the hell?
Yeah. And honestly, Twitter is one of those places that it's very just, you
It's
only
a
get like
cesspool, man.
280 characters or whatever. So people are just on there like ready to dunk on someone or say the meanest thing about someone. And don't get me wrong, I fall victim to it too, or I go and, see some dumb tweet from someone, some politician, and I just got to say something about it. And I think I kind of changed how I use Twitter. It's like, I don't really go after lower level people anymore. Like if it's like an elite, I'll definitely go after them. But usually if it's some, dude with like 30 followers and is kind of a libertarian, like says something like not the perfect answer or something for libertarians, then I don't even care. Like as long as you're good on like the important issues, then you're cool with me.
Yeah. Well, and like I don't even use Twitter for that so much. I'll do it every once in a while. Like I'm on there very little, especially since I started working locally because I'm so busy all the time now. But one thing I do try to do, and some people take it the wrong way, and I try to remain sarcastic. I try to keep the sarcasm flowing because we all gotta laugh, man. We all gotta laugh. This shit is way too absurd to not laugh at. Number one. And number two, if I see a friend that somebody I really respect and really care for saying something that I'm like, whoa, like you're wrong there, it gives me an opportunity to kind of approach their mindset in short form and just question it. And when you have those types of friends that you're able to question and you're able to challenge and they respect that, then that's a good thing. And so I think people like get this whole notion of, oh, well, you just stay in your bubble. All wrong. Sometimes staying in your bubble is the right thing to do. Sometimes your bubble's where you need to be, because sometimes your bubble needs to be sharpened and manicured to be able to elicit the proper response.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like that's why, like, I don't really care what type of libertarian someone is. I'm friends with people that are like, all about the Mises Caucus, and I'm friends with people that are like more agorist and just, the Mises Caucus ain't their thing. And, and then like there's libertarians were so small that, we get so bogged down in like small infighting sometimes, but at the same time, sometimes it goes the other way where it's like I see like two people arguing about something that's kind of legitimate, and then people are like, "Oh my God, Twitter, Liberty Twitter's infighting again," and it's like, no, like they're just having a conversation about something and disagreeing. Like I don't see the problem.
They're trying to hash out an issue. Let them hash it out.
Yeah,
maybe there will be a solution at the end of it. Like the great philosophers of our of history. Hashed out philosophy, and they did it through writing. Like they wrote books and articles, and they would attack each other, and not personally, but they would attack each other's ideas and really like go to town and really try to dig out the truth and those things that were not effective. And so like let people do that. I don't have a problem with that. You know what I'm saying? Like one of my biggest issues with libertarians in general, and I haven't heard anybody else say it this way, but that's not to say that I'm the only one who thinks this way. And it's what Ace Archist and Josh Childress and myself talked about on the podcast we did together a few episodes ago, was the way that libertarians approach narrative, and they approach their messaging, which you hear people talk about messaging, but I'm not so interested in liberty messaging. I'm interested in narrative. that attracts people, that makes people curious, inquisitive, and it attracts them in the same way that a Stephen King novel would attract a reader, right? And so I'm trying to find this link because, all right, so if you talk to if you listen to politicians, they're always telling stories. And everybody's like, oh, well, that never actually happened. Well, it doesn't matter if it actually happened because it made somebody feel something. This is like what metaphor is. This is what hyperbole does, right? You're speaking to people's emotions. You're not speaking to the rational side of their brain. That's not what you're doing. And so it doesn't matter if what was Joe Biden's buddy pork chop or whatever ever existed. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Who cares? Because he's speaking to something else. He's talking to somebody else. He's telling a myth, right? He's speaking metaphorically, and he's trying to encounter an archetypal figure that will attract people emotionally to his message. It doesn't really matter if he actually knew somebody named T-Bone or whatever. I don't remember what that was. It was some weird nickname, but and he was a bad motherfucker. But it doesn't really fucking matter. That's not what the point of the story is. The point of the story is to attract voters. That's what Joe Biden's trying to do. He's trying to get votes. Like, he doesn't care if the story's real or if it actually happened. And so, like, he tells this convoluted story about these what is my dog doing? My wife is yelling at my dog. I don't know what he did. That worries me. Boogie's always in trouble. He tells these convoluted stories about, like, his experiences meeting veterans, and he mixes like 5 different veterans together and creates one person. Well, it's an archetype. It's like he's creating an archetype, and it doesn't matter if it wasn't literally true. It was true in the in the meta sense of truth. And so we watch politicians do this constantly, but I don't see any libertarians doing this. I don't see any libertarians gripping on to the narrative, to the meta truths, and creating a story that attracts people to libertarianism. See, like, there are some people, and I'm not picking on Matt because I love Matt. I'm releasing an episode with Matt tomorrow. But Matt Erickson, he says the problem with libertarianism is that people have heard of it and rejected it. But why are they rejecting it? Because it doesn't speak to anything internally that moves them, right? So you have to learn to move people, right? This is what the great thinkers, great literature, great art has always done for people. It gives you a piece of the divine. It gives you a piece of the answer to life. What, like, in an emotive way, not in a literal sense, but emotionally. You have, like, the Green New Deal. That's an answer, right? That's a big answer to a big problem. And people respond to that answer. Libertarians aren't offering an answer, right? They're offering anti-answers, right? Like, kind of like anti-heroes. And so when people like you come from the military and you have a story, you have a way to shape yourselves and say, look, this is what happened to me. That's important. People need to hear that. You're right? Because most libertarians don't have that story. Most of them are too autistic to put together a story, honestly.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with libertarians is they try to use the same methods that attracted them to the movement as the way to attract other people. And I don't know if you've ever read Jonathan Haidt's one of his books. I can't remember the name of his book.
No, I've never read any of his books, and I know he has the Better Angels of Our Nature or something like that.
Yeah,
which is supposed to be fantastic. And
in the book, he describes libertarians as the least empathetic and most logical. So and that kind of sits with us where we're not worried about like exactly the emotional side of things. Where most libertarians we want to be logically consistent, and we want to be practical for the situation. But that doesn't attract a lot of people being logical. Just saying, right. When politicians can give answers, even if it's not a logical answer, it's an answer that people are looking for, and people are attracted to this through their emotions. And the type of messaging a lot of times that comes from libertarians is very logical. Well, we don't want to increase minimum wage because logically that makes no sense because it'll cause inflation. But instead, you want to, you have to come at it with more emotion and explain to people. And I think a lot of libertarians fail at that. And
well, they do. They do. I just want to touch on that just for a second, and then I'll let you finish. I'm sorry, but they do, because they'll come up with these catchphrases like, "We want to take over the world and leave you alone," thinking that does something for the average person. But the average person doesn't necessarily want to be left alone. They want to be part of a society. They want to be part of a culture. They want to be part of something. You have to learn how to make them part of something. Like we were talking about camaraderie in the military, right? Getting out of the military is very hard because you're trying to recreate this brotherhood structure that you had already had, right? And so libertarianism does not offer that. Whatever it offers, it isn't that. So we have to, how do we get to that? How do you create the narrative around that? And that's what they need to figure out, right? I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just felt like that was important that they don't understand that.
Yeah. And like you were saying with the narrative, and how a lot of times when someone is creating a narrative, not everything they're saying is true. And I think the biggest way for me to understand it was I'll use comedians. Comedians are telling you a story a lot of times, and a lot of times the story is not even true. And it didn't happen to them, or maybe they read about it in the news or something. But most of the time, their stories they're telling maybe they're half truths, but they fill a lot of things in there. And the reason they do that is because they know it'll get a reaction from the crowd. They're trying to get laughter. And but for libertarians, they need to get something that'll actually capture people into their movement, that'll actually accept their beliefs, which is maybe even harder to do, because you have to get someone to rethink things and leave the people, maybe possibly even leave the political people around them to go do something else. And if you're not offering any sort of narrative, then it's really hard for people to move over, because Republicans have a narrative. Now, what that narrative is maybe we don't what the reality is, and what the narrative is maybe is not the same, but that narrative's there.
But people are living within that narrative. They don't live within the reality. The narrative is reality to these people, right? Mm-hmm. Trump was making America great again. It doesn't matter how much you point out that Trump fucked up. Well, he had to do that. Yeah, they always have an excuse. But the cognitive dissonance, like I said, it makes sense. When you realize that they're trying to live in an archetypical structure and not in reality. They're trying to grasp something that's beyond our grasp. And libertarians are much too rational to talk about that. And so when we get into the how do you create that brotherhood? How do you create that narrative, right? Which is something that Biting the Bullet is doing. You are creating narrative. Now you're telling your own stories, your own experiences, right? But how many times have you ever had a situation where you're talking to somebody you were hanging out with, right? And you're like, remember that time we did blah, 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 and went blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah happened? And they're like, well, I remember this and I remember this, but that didn't happen at the same time as this. And, you know, like, because you create these narratives in your head. That's how you live your life. That's how you remember your past. That's how you shape your future. You shape your future through narratives. I'm going to be yada, 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 and this is what it's going to look like, and this is what it's going to feel like, and this is what we're going to be doing. This is who I'm going to be married to. This is how many kids we're going to have. This is going to be the vacations we go on. Yeah, you're creating narratives, and then you live out these narratives, but libertarians don't offer narrative at all, period, ever. And so that's why I like talking to people like you, because you are putting out a narrative. Like, whether you realize it or not, like Biting the Bullet is putting out a narrative. You're making people laugh. You're making people cry. You're like touching the soul of veterans, which is your goal, right? And you're like getting involved. And so I'm like, oh, that's fucking fantastic. How are they doing it? Right? Like, how are they doing it? Then you're just relaying experience. But at the same time, you're pulling people into your experience.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know. I always thought about, like, because the whole narrative thing that you brought up, that I remember Pete talking about it on his show, and Pete's probably one of the biggest influences in my libertarian life, and I never really thought of something like that before, but I actually a little bit of like what that has happened to me, where I became friends with these two guys, and they were friends a little bit before I knew them, but they would tell this story all the time to people all around me. And it was this story that happened. It was just them two in the story, because it happened before I arrived in the group. And after a long time of being friends with them, there was sometimes that I would tell the story thinking that I was part of the story, and they would just, like, one of them would just be like, oh yeah, you were there, and then the other one would be like, wait, no, you weren't. But like, they told it over and over so many times.
But you lived that story through them telling it.
Through them telling it. Yeah. So after like a couple years, I mean, I'm sure there's things that I conflate with like my own personal experiences and stuff, and I mix things up all the time, and my memory is probably not the best, but I think the best way that we spread the narrative is just by telling our story and what we believe. And I think that personal anecdote in things is what really drives the narrative, because when you get very passionate or emotional, even that's laughter can be a great emotion, or sadness. I mean, we get angry on our podcast sometimes, and those emotions are like real, at least in the moment when I'm on the podcast discussing things. Like, it's real for me. I actually feel that way. And it kind of builds that narrative of like, if this really upsets this guy, this probably should upset me in some way, or at least they can sympathetic and understand why I feel that way. Right. And I think that, that's another thing with, libertarians it's hard for them to be emotional. I like that passion. This is like one of the things that I really like about like Dave Smith, is when he talks about something, he's always very, very passionate about it. And that sort of passion is like, I have passion for this stuff. But, sometimes when I'm talking to like people in real like life, there's not very many libertarians where I live at. It's in the middle. It's a small town, but most people are like kind of Trump supporters or Republican-ish. And, so sometimes like I can't like say the thing or get as passionate, because the maybe like when I get passionate about something, I'm afraid that like people around here will be like, wait, what are you talking about? Like, that's not our narrative. Like, what? So like sometimes I might hold back in certain situations, especially at work or something.
Yeah.
I don't want to get my politics mixed in my job or anything like that.
Right.
But then when I'm around my friends and I'm on the podcast, like I know this is when I can like, what I was thinking about, what I was feeling about, I can get that out right now.
That is your truth at that moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm probably wrong about a lot of things.
We all are. None of us have figured this out.
Yeah. I'm probably wrong about a lot of things. I mean, and some things I have, at least that I can remember, I know I was wrong about, and I'll go back and be like, oh man, I was wrong about this or whatever, but
yeah,
I was right about this and along the way, but I'm kind of right in the general direction. But yeah, I think having a lot of emotion and passion is what people want. And it makes me go back to podcast more and more. The more passionate I feel someone is about whatever they're talking about. Like Ron Paul is like, he got very passionate about the Federal Reserve.
Yes.
Like very passionate.
Scott Horton about wars. Have you had him on your show?
No, I have not.
Oh, you should, dude. Like you would have a blast.
Yeah.
I promise you he won't say no.
Well, I'm going to take your word on that.
He never says no. Scott has this philosophy that I really admire. That I'll go on any show that I can go on and to talk about these things, because I might be reaching someone that I wouldn't have reached previously, and they need to hear it too. And I love that about Scott. It's great. He was the first person I ever interviewed. Like, honestly.
Really?
In 2018, awesome. Yeah. I interviewed Scott Horton and Pete Quinones were my first two fucking interviews. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's like that persona, it really made me admire Scott in a way that I don't think I admire anybody else. Is that, you know what? These guys that I'm talking to might be real pieces of shit, but they have somebody in their audience that is going to be willing to hear this message, and they need to hear it. And I'm willing to have that conversation. And I love that. Like, that's a really, really interesting, passionate way of approaching a message.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the passion is what's needed, because the Ron Paul thing, like, honestly, like, the Federal Reserve, like, if you talk to anyone about economics of the Federal Reserve, it's probably the most like boring thing that you can talk to people about. Like, most people now, like the people that we hang out with at Childeberg, we could probably talk to them for hours about economics and stuff.
Have you ever heard Doug Stanhope's bit on economics?
No, I haven't.
Oh, dude, I'll send that to you after this is over. It's fucking hilarious. It's like it is. I always say it is the best takedown of Keynesian economics ever in history. Like, he just
I love that.
He destroys it, and it's so fucking funny at the same time.
But Ron Paul got the narrative, and you got a bunch of young kids be screaming in the Fed, like passionately yelling in the Fed. And it's stuff like that, where like he just broke it down enough to where like people can understand, understand that they don't fully understand what the Fed does, or like how they're exactly screwing you all the time. But he is explaining that this is the cause of a lot of our problems, and just that little message to get people to start shouting in the Fed is it's amazing. Because like it's probably the most boring topic, and you got a bunch of people like yelling it, and
a bunch of college students, yeah. It wasn't even people that had bad experiences with Bank of America. It was a bunch of college students.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Like honestly, like, you know, I was in the military, and then I went to school in the GI Bill. So I'm like not in any sort of like crazy debt, like most people my age are.
Yeah.
But like just people that are very passionate about like the whole Federal Reserve and then Austrian economics. Like I just, you know, like I just love it. I don't know, like that's what gets me into things is like if I'm watching or listening to someone, like it could be about anything, but if they're passionate about it and like really into it, like I can, you know, watch or listen or whatever it is that they're presenting.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that this goes back to narrative too. Because Austrian economics is brilliant. The way they break things down, the way Rothbard and Mises were able to break things down, brilliant, right? But if libertarians want to know how they sound to people, go listen to an economics audiobook. Just try to make it all the way through your favorite economics audiobook. Like, just try. You'll get halfway through the first chapter and you'll be like, oh my fucking God, I'm brain dead. Like, I don't want to listen to this fucking dry fucking rhetoric. Like, no, like, and that's why I always like promote that Doug Stanhope bit, because he dresses it up and he makes it this like thing that's happening, and you can see this thing happening and you're like, oh wow, that's fucking insanity, you know? But that's why comedians are so successful. That's why Dave Smith is able to deliver in such a passionate way, because he's trained himself to talk about these dry subjects in such a way that is very narrative oriented and not factual oriented. And that's why his podcast is so good. His podcast is brilliant because he covers a lot of in-depth conversation, a lot of in-depth thought in a way that is intriguing, because he's telling a story while he's doing it. Mm-hmm. But that's a lot of like training. Well, he's trained himself to do that.
So much of the focus of my podcast is to point out abuses of power and how bad things have gotten and the direction in which we're heading as a society. And it can be a real black pill. I've partnered up with Richard Grove to offer my listeners an opportunity to sign up to his Autonomy Course. The Autonomy Course is designed for people looking for solutions, people that want to shape their own future, people that are not willing to be at the behest of large corporations or the United States government or the banking system. The Autonomy Course is designed for those of you who wish to have complete control of the reins of your life, who are looking to be successful, that to thrive and not just survive, to provide for your family by utilizing your existing skills and learning how to market and sell those skills in order to be your own boss, or learn new skills in order to leverage that into a new career opportunity. So if there's a job out there you've been trying to get or you've been wishing you could get, but you just don't have the skills for it, the Autonomy Course is the place for you to start, to learn how to land that position, to learn how to market yourself better, to gain confidence, and to be surrounded by a community of like-minded people that will encourage you and help you along the way. So use my affiliate links and go check out the Autonomy Course. It could be right for you.
Yeah, and I think, this is one of the reasons why, drill instructors and drill sergeants have so much of an effect on you as a young man.
Because they yelled at you all the time.
Because they're yelling and they're so passionate about it. Like they have so much
very
passion.
animated. Very animated.
Yes, very excited out there. I mean, there's when you do like the most minor thing wrong, they make it seem like it's the end of the world.
Yeah.
For you. Like,
yeah.
And in a way, it is.
Do you want to die, Private? That's how you die.
And it's so passionate. And I mean, if like obviously they go through their own training for this or whatever, but they're the ones that give you like that first introduction into like the military, and with their passion for it, that's what sticks with you. And I think that's why, that's probably why they made the boot camp the way it is because that like most people don't like see, you don't see that sort of passion. Like you don't see people yelling and screaming about like, you're not covered in a line, or you're not marching right, or like whatever, like you're not walking the right way and you're yelling at me for this. Like what is happening? And I think that's what gets people like, when I left the Marine Corps or left Marine Corps boot camp, and they teach you about its history and stuff, but like, they teach you that you are the best fighting force on the entire planet. You are the 1% of the you are less than 1% of Americans. Less than 1% join the military. And they make it seem like it's this huge thing. They put you on top of the world. And then that narrative is not only like being transferred to you as a recruit or a young private or whatever, it's also all around you. So when you like go out in the civilian world, you get thank you for your service, and let me buy you this, let me give you this discount, let me do all this. You get a whole day that we celebrate you, and like all this. And so like that's a great narrative to be in. Like you're gonna get celebrated, the people are gonna love you automatically, people thank you for your service, people like if people think you're automatically a badass, even if you might not be, like people just they think the greatest things about people in the
the and it's all metaphor.
It creates that narrative.
It's all metaphor.
Yeah, and most people have no idea.
Like nobody honestly believes if you forget to start your BDUs, you're going to get killed. Like nobody actually believes that. Like go stand in Walmart in unironed clothes and wait on somebody to yell at you about your clothes being unironed. You'll be there forever. Nobody truly believes that because you didn't start your BDUs properly that you're going to die. That's not what the point is. The point is discipline, in that every little action, every small step you take, every small action you take actually has a reaction, right? And that reaction, if you allow things to get out of line and create into, like, you enter the world of chaos, then you could like put yourself in a position and your friends in a position that you will all die. So you have to act in uniform in order to keep everyone alive, right? You have to act right. You have to be right in this way. And so that's what they're teaching you. But they're teaching you this in this like really unsophisticated, barbaric, way that speaks to a portion of your mind that you probably have never trained at all and never even looked at, never thought about, and you probably don't even care about it. You're like, all right, yeah, I'm a civilized human being, until you go to basic training and you're face down in the mud for 100 fucking yards with an 80-pound ruck on your back, and the explosives are going off all around you. You're no longer civilized. You want to kill a motherfucker. How do you stay alive in that situation? You have everything in order. Mm-hmm. Down to the smallest detail. Everything's got to be in order.
It's so much more intense environment that they create. And like you said, that they literally make people believe that if their BDUs are wrinkled, that, well, you just got the guy to the left and right of you killed because you're not paying attention to detail. Yeah. that I think that's why like boot camps are so intense, is it's designed to get people into that narrative and understand like that what this is, and and to obey on command. But I'm not saying that we have to put libertarians through boot camp to get them as better,
Maybe we
passionate. Well, me and Tommy going to start a libertarian boot camp.
These soft-bodied motherfuckers.
Oh man.
I've run into a few of them. I was just like, I just bitch. Like, if you ever said that to my face, I would knock the dog shit out of you. You have no idea how hard I would hit you for saying shit like that.
Yeah, and like, and like I've heard this before, but like Twitter is not always like reality. So they always see people like going after each other, people saying the harshest thing about on Twitter and whatnot. But and I don't know what narrative that creates for libertarian Twitter. And like, even libertarians will say it's a dumpster fire. But, and I don't really know. Like,
well, I mean, see, I've been reading way too much Jung here lately. I've been reading a lot of Carl Jung lately, and that's why this conversation has gone in the direction it's gone. I'm very aware that that's where I'm taking it, but it's like it's this idea that these people are speaking through their ego with no actual awareness of who they actually are, right? And this is where like you'll see people every once in a while identify it, and you're like, oh, this is a person that's never experienced violence ever. They've never looked in the eyes of violence at all, period. And so you can identify these people like very quickly. You can identify somebody that has never experienced violence, and the way you can identify people that have never experienced violence, because they are the first people to threaten violence. And they have no idea what the repercussions of violence are. Like, you don't know what violence begets, right? Like, you have no idea. If you've ever like been in a violent situation, like, you think twice about begetting violence. You know what I'm saying? And so like it's very easy to tell these, like I say, these soft body little like pussies have never done a hard day's work in their life. They've never been out in the sun sweating for 12 hours a day. They've never done these things. And they've never experienced violence. And I'm not talking about like a fight. I'm talking about like engage with Mother Nature for a week and tell me how it feels. Your whole body hurts. Your whole existence hurts. And that's what they teach you in basic training. Like, you're out there, you go on a fucking 20-mile ruck, right? You're out there for a week, sleeping on and eating, like, you're sleeping 4 hours a night. You're cold. You're wet. You're fucking, you feel like you're dying, and you're eating out of a bag. A plastic bag. They won't give you the time to heat it up. You can't. They don't even give you the 2 minutes to pour water on it to let the fucking it heat up. They're just like, no, eat and go. You got a minute. Go. Like, well, it takes 2 minutes to heat this up. Oh, I don't give a fuck. That's your problem.
Yeah.
That's not my problem. That's your problem. Oh, you didn't finish eating? Too bad. Crawl 100 yards in the mud with an 80-pound ruck between your legs. Under barbed wire with explosives going off all around you. Do it. Like, you're conquering parts of what it means to be a man in such a way. And I'm not saying that everybody should join the military. That's not where that's nowhere near where I'm coming from. I'm just saying, like, the violence that you experience in that moment, like that desire to live and to survive through that, like, that tyranny that's going on all around you, is like nothing most people have ever experienced.
Yeah, some sort of, like, honestly, you can get maybe a little bit of dose of that in like some sort of sport. Training.
Yeah.
Pushing, like maybe a little bit, and maybe that's a way some people can have some experience, because you have to, competition, push yourself to the moment. Sometimes you're hurt and you're tired and but you got to keep going.
Well, you got to practice. You never stop working. You're always like trying to improve yourself. You want to be the star player, right? And this was something I had a conversation with one of my kids the other day about, and he's striking out on his own and moving out of his mom's house. And I'm like, I'm happy for you. Like, I hope everything works out well. And I told him, I said, like, what you need to realize is that as you go forward, like, you're going to learn that things aren't always what they seem. So you may enter into an adventure of your life, or a portion of your life, that with the best of intentions, right? And the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? We've been told that all our lives. And so, like, but it's not about your intent, it's about the results. So if you have good intentions and you achieve bad results, then you failed, right? Because what you did was not good. That was not a good action. As much as you wanted it to be a good action, as much as you thought it was going to be a good action. I was like, now this sounds like super pessimistic. But my son was a big baseball player. I told him, I said, think about it like baseball. If you hit 300 for your career, you're a Hall of Famer. You only have to hit 300, dude. And you're a king. You're king of the world. You're Mark Cuban. Yeah. You're fucking Bill Gates. You only have to hit 300. You don't have to hit it bat 1,000. Like, and so you're going to fail, and everybody's going to fail, and everybody's going to have these situations where it hurts and you feel like you're shit, but you just got to push through it. And that's what basic training teaches you. Just push through it.
Yeah.
It's not about how tough you are. It's about how mentally tough you are.
Yeah. And another thing too, is like, I don't think a lot of people I don't know. I think maybe a lot of people don't really know what struggle is, living on your own, or living, when I got out of the military, I lived with my 2 roommates, but like, we were kind of on our own. Right. We were paying our own bills. And if we didn't pay our bills on time, we lost power or whatever it was, lost water or whatever. And, that transition going from the military right into like, now I'm responsible for myself, is you got to have to figure it out. And it takes practice. You can't just, hang out with your friends and drink as much as you want. You got real shit to do now. Like, you don't get that guaranteed paycheck every 2 weeks if you take 2 weeks leave, or if you work your ass off for 2 weeks, but right. No matter what, you got paid. And then when you get out, it's not like that, man. It's all about the number of hours you worked, what kind of job you have. And, like, you got to kind of figure it out. And, you kind of struggle with that at first. And I think a lot of people don't really have that struggle. And maybe, I don't know, it seems like most people I knew growing up here, they grew up, they went to high school for 18 years. So they're being babysat by their parents in the state. And then they go to college for 4 years, and, they kind of get babysat there, and or they live with their parents or whatever. And no one really experienced like the real world. So like the only thing they know is like what they saw in college, and then what they saw at their nice job that they got because their parents put them through college. And they don't really understand what it's like to be a regular person that, has trouble paying the bills or doing whatever they need to do, or working 2 jobs. And, like, I think a lot of people don't get that experience, and I don't really know if you like, that's a good thing everyone should go through. I'm not saying everyone has to struggle, but I feel like that struggle of like, almost like, damn, if I don't pay this, I'm fucking kicked out of here. It changes your perspective a little bit when you're
I think
growing up.
I think it is a good thing. I think it builds character, it builds strength, it builds internal resilience, you know, and but by being tested is how you find out what you are made of, right? This is what boot camp is. This is what basic training is. They test you. You find out what you're made of. You come out the other side and you're like, holy shit, you know? Yeah, you're like, I didn't know. You look back at it and you're like, 6 months before I did that, I would have never thought I could do that. Right?
Yeah.
You know? And so, like, going through that storm, you know, going through that storm and coming out the other side, the phoenix rising from the ashes, you know, kind of deal. You're right. You're torn down for fucking 18 weeks. And then suddenly you're elevated. You know, like it's just like it's like an instantaneous thing, right? And yeah, you got to maintain that. There's a matter of maintaining that, but you've accomplished something. You've gone through hell, and you've come out the other side better for it, right?
Yeah.
And so this is kind of like when you look at like people that commit suicide. You gotta like, because I think about the things I've been through, right? And the things that have made me think about suicide. Not even attempt suicide, just think about suicide. You know, and I'm talking from 42 years of experience. You got to think about the hell this person was going through to get to that point where they broke to the extent to say that life is no longer worth living, right? That's got to be a really bad place. That's got to be a really dark place. But how much of a better person would they have been if they would have come out the other side as a phoenix out of the ashes and risen above all of that?
For sure. And
You know?
I know there's a lot of people that when after they attempt suicide and they fail, that they come out of it and they wish they never did it. And then I know a lot of people, like, you know, when you're on the, you know, the level of like committing suicide, it's like, you know, almost anything can make it better. Like if you're on the brink of like, I'm going to kill myself, like having a, you know, couple friends and then a shitty girlfriend and a place to live, like that's not the best, but it's much better than you were before when you were on the brink of suicide. So like, you know, anything that could, you know, make your situation better is better. And then even when those people, like, your life is still not the best and you still have problems or whatever, don't get me wrong. And a lot of people do, but you are in a much better position than you were when you were thinking about it, or at least attempted it or whatever. And I think a lot of people get lost in themselves and think that, you know, this is the worst my life's ever been, and this is there's no way out of it, so I don't want to.
Well, it's not worth living. Yeah, it's not worth.
Yeah,
living.
it's not worth living, and you know, and that's another thing is, you know, we talk about this a lot on our podcast, but veteran suicides, and you know, it's like once a year I'm seeing another friend of mine that's killed themselves, and it's, you know, and like I always, you know, they always said that like veteran suicide was pretty high, but when I got out, you know, no one knows. A lot of times it's hard to tell like who's gonna have these thoughts, and especially when you get separated from each other and it's harder to keep up. And thank God for social media. So now we have, you know, a little bit more a chance to connect with people that, you know, I talk to people that live in El Paso and a guy that lives in Minnesota all the time, people that I went to, and I haven't seen them since I've been out of the military. But a lot of times people get lost after they get out, because the military almost for a lot of people becomes your identity. It's something that's embedded in you. And especially when you're 18 to 22 or 23, whatever it is, you know, that's like your college years. So like, that's like your age of like you growing and developing. And when you have this sort of identity that you've embedded in yourself, it's really hard for people to transition because they don't have that identity anymore. I mean, they'll always like, once a Marine, always a Marine, and people always say stuff like that. But when you have no one around that you can share those values with and talk about things, because man, if I didn't have my two friends that I moved in with, I don't know if I would have been good friends with many people, because I probably would have sounded crazy about the things that I talked about and the things that I thought were funny and my perspective on things. And I mean, I've tried. Actually, I know when I was going to school, I would try to talk to people, and they just either just don't get it, they don't care to understand, or they just, there's nothing they could even say in that situation. Because they don't know what to say. They don't experience people like us that been through these different events in our lives where, you know, it's just really weird. And, you know, the suicide rate in the military it's probably going to, I think it's been going up because of all this COVID stuff. And I think it's one of the worst things someone can do, because, you know, it's not going to be forever, man. You don't have to be in the military forever. And when you get out, it can be a lot better, but you really have to find a community, because even though the Marine Corps and the structure is not what you want, but they force you into a community, and that community does care about you in some way. I mean, there's a lot of people that I've met in the military that I'd probably never be friends with, but since we were in the military, he lived right next door to me or lived with me, it's hard not to get to know them, and they basically become your family. Like, and it's really hard to get away, and especially if veterans that don't have a good family to go back to. That's probably one of the biggest things. And so I always advise, like, man, go to the VFW, go hang out, go somewhere where people that are like you, and get to know people and build a community around you, because I think that's the number one reason why people do commit suicide, because they believe they don't have people to turn to. Yeah.
Well, hey man, we've been going well over an hour, and this went in many directions I didn't expect it to go, mainly because I ramble at will, and
I do the same.
But I enjoyed it, and I want to do it again, because I think this is valuable to talk about these things and get into these subjects. But I do want to stop this one here, because I think there's a lot here. So
yeah, for sure. And then we'll definitely have to get you on our podcast, man.
Yeah, for sure, man. I'll come on anytime that I can, not at work.
Yeah, we'll work it out.
But yeah, we can do that for absolutely sure. I will do it. Plug away, man. Make sure everybody knows where to find you. I'll make sure to put links and everything. So
yeah, you can find us at bitingthebullet.com or bitingthebulletpodcast.com. Sorry. And that'll give you links to all of our social media and our episodes and stuff. And you can pretty much find all of our podcast episodes on, you know, all the biggest podcatchers. Biting the Bullet, we're the only ones, so go ahead and search it. If you want to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter at the real Typo.
All right, dude. I'm going to stop the recording here.
Said you're just a slave. All your good intentions took you to your grave. Your pride is how they killed you. With the flag you waved just like a fool. They promised you a mountain, gifted you a stone. They demanded that you throw it into your neighbor's home, and then seize all that they worked for and give it to the throne just like a tool. Well, as we all just stand in line and glorify new ways of being cruel, seems to me humanity is not something that they're teaching us in school. They dumbs down all around, propaganda, their pollution. They set a cage up on the stage, a facade for all solution. To build a wall, block them all from this mental institution. It's insane. Now they're writing their own rule books and they're crossing all their T's. They're fashioning their people to all wear beggars' knees. If you want a clean drink of water, well, you must say pretty please. It's all a game. As we all just stand in line and justify these crimes done in our names. It seems to me authority and tyranny are both one and the same. Well, it's time to change the channel. It's time to set things right. Make them all rot with fear in their beds at night. Devour all their worthless souls and sacrificial right, just like we should. Cause this world needs a cleansing to burn away the shame and destroy all the remnants of those who are to blame. And we'll stack them up like cordwood, watch them sizzle on the flames for good. Well, as we all just stand in line waiting for some kind of Robin Hood, our liberty will never be until our right to freedom is understood.